Having united the warriors of terror with the tech priests of Mars in the newborn Imperium of Man, the Emperor began his Great Crusade to reunite mankind after the turbulence in the Immaterium suddenly calmed. Yet the event that made possible humanity's return to the stars resulted in the near extinction of the Aeldari species. Once the dominant force in the Milky Way, the heart of their great empire was torn out by the birth of a new, godlike entity in the warp. This hideous being had been born of the Aeldari's pride and uncontrolled selfishness. The cost was incredibly high, taking not only billions of Aeldari lives, but also stealing away the immortality that had defined them. No longer able to guarantee their reincarnation at death, the Aeldari survivors were forced to build new civilizations. Each adapted to their changed circumstances in wildly different ways. But at their heart, each of these new traditions remained dedicated to selfish goals. Still, though they always served their own interests, the Aeldari's destiny was interwoven with that of humanity. They would prove to be mankind's only true ally in the war against the Emperor's great enemies. But every Imperial servant who dealt with these unpredictable aliens remembered one rule: never turn your back on an Aeldari. Even as the Imperial armies completed the conquest of the Sol system, far to the galactic northwest of Terra, a massive, permanent warp storm now bled into the material universe like a stain on reality. Its birth was the source of the brilliant light seen across so many worlds when the warp turbulence that had defined old night ended. In truth, the new warp storm was the result of a massive psychic shockwave unleashed by the birth of an entity into the warp known as Slaanesh. Slaanesh was a demonic god of amoral pleasure and corruption. It had claimed the souls of the majority of Aeldari at the moment it achieved full awareness in the Immaterium. But the Aeldari had only themselves to blame. For millions of years, the Aeldari had ruled the galaxy as its undisputed masters. Their incredible psychic ability and the immortality it granted allowed them to treat life like an endless, waking dream. Its only purpose was to achieve a perfection of experience before the cycle began once more through reincarnation. At the same time, their advanced technology insulated them from all hardship. This left long centuries for them to sate every desire, to satisfy their passions in each new life and indulge in every extreme of sensation. They also made use of the webway. This was a labyrinth of multi-dimensional corridors that threaded through both the Immaterium and real space, yet was kept separate from the warp and shielded from its dangers. It had been constructed by an unknown alien race and allowed the Aeldari to move about the galaxy with a speed and ease that seemed magical to other species. The Aeldari built great city realms dedicated to trade and exploration within the winding corridors of the webway. The population of these cities sometimes exceeded even those of whole Aeldari worlds. But as the centuries passed, the Aeldari increasingly gave into ever more hedonistic impulses in their quest to achieve each life's perfect experiences. Exotic cults emerged on many Aeldari worlds and in the webway cities. These were dedicated to the heights of sensual excess. A sickness slowly overtook the Aeldari. Blood flowed in the streets of many Aeldari cities to meet the demands for violent gladiatorial spectacles. Whole worlds were given over to cruelty, as Aeldari demanded the right to experience the most sadistic pleasures. They practiced such tortures upon each other, and upon any member of the lesser races who fell into their grasping hands. As this amoral corruption grew worse, the psychic echoes of agony and ecstasy began to ripple through space and time. In the Immaterium, a dark new entity began to take shape, for the shifting tides of psychic energy can form around large amounts of intense emotion until they achieve consciousness. Slowly and silently over 5,000 years, the psychic energy of the Aeldari's corrupt desires birthed the god of excess and selfish pleasure in the warp. It was the turbulent energy of this gestation that cut humanity off from the warp during the Age of Strife. When the dark entity that called itself Slaanesh finally burst into awareness, it was with a psychic scream of raw power that was seen across the galaxy as a blazing brand in the sky. Formed from the spiritual emanations of the Aeldari in the warp, Slaanesh thirsted for every Aeldari soul. Billions screamed aloud and fell dead instantly, their spirits drawn from their crumbling bodies. It was not for nothing that the few survivors would name their great enemy, She Who Thirsts. At the same time, the sheer energy unleashed by Slaanesh's birth tore a hole in reality itself, consuming all the worlds at the heart of the Aeldari Empire. What was left behind was a permanent warp storm, known later as the Eye of Terror, that served as an interface between real space and the warp. Within its confines, the the real and the unreal could coexist in the same space. Real matter interacted directly with pure psychic energy, while mortals could cavort openly with the denizens of the warp. The core worlds of the Aeldari Empire still existed within the rift, battered husks called crone worlds that were now subject to the whims of warp entities. For the first time, the beings of the Immaterium were able to exist alongside the inhabitants of real space, and they hungered for even more. They would not be satisfied until the union of the material and the immaterial that manifested in the Eye of Terror consumed all of reality. But it was not only the souls of mortals that fed Slaanesh's thirst. The Aeldari's own gods were beings who also existed within the warp. They lay at the heart of the mythological cycles that define their culture. These beings were also absorbed into Slaanesh's growing consciousness. Asuryan the Phoenix King, the leader of the Pantheon, Isha, the goddess of fertility and parent to the Aeldari race alongside her consort Kurnus the Hunter, Vol the Artificer who taught the Aeldari how to create, even Morai Heg, the crone goddess who determined the fate of every soul, all were consumed by She Who Thirsts. Only two survived the fall of the Aeldari. The laughing god, Segarak, escaped through guile into the wilds of the webway, his laughter echoing off its endless corridors. The god of war, Kayla Mensha Kane, chose to stand against Slaanesh in the warp, but the god of pleasure proved the stronger in their combat. But Kane also exhausted She Who Thirsts, who could not destroy him completely. Instead, he was rent into psychic fragments, which found an unexpected home among a faction of the Aeldari survivors. And despite all the loss and horror, some Aeldari had survived the fall of their civilization. Each group, knowing that at death their souls would be consumed by She Who Thirsts, was forced to choose a very different way of life than any they had known before. The first group of survivors were called Exodites, for they had chosen exile from the Aeldari homeworlds in the early days of the pleasure cults. They had seen the foulness infecting their culture, and chose instead to settle on newly terraformed colonies known as Maiden Worlds. Here they chose to live a far more austere life than their fellows. They forsook advanced technology to raise crops, tend to herds of huge reptiles, and harvest natural resources without upsetting the environmental balance. The Exodites found their salvation in restoring hardship to their lives. Busy surviving, they had no time to indulge in the old pleasures. To protect their souls from Slaanesh, the Exodites erected a global network of crystalline stone circles they called the World Spirit. At death, every Exodite's soul was drawn into the World Spirit. Those Exodites with specific psychic talents could travel to the World Spirit's various nodes. There, sometimes the living and the dead could commune. The second group of surviving Aeldari had repented of their ways only a short time before the fall. They had fled the homeworlds into deep space aboard continent-sized starships called craft worlds. They had gone just far enough to avoid the immediate pull of Slaanesh upon their souls at the Dark God's birth. Believing they were the true children of Asuryan, the Phoenix King, they called themselves the Asuryani. They resolved to pass on their lost culture to new generations through song, dance, and the recitation of the mythological tales about their lost gods and epic heroes. Seeking only to stay one step ahead of She Who Thirsts and her minions, the people of the craft worlds even stopped calling themselves Aeldari, a word defined by loss. They became the Eldar to outsiders, a diminished name for a fallen race. To keep themselves free of the extremes that had cost them so much, the Eldar adopted a philosophy known as the Asuryani Path, which governed every aspect of craft world life. At adulthood, each Eldar chose a particular career called a path they sought to master above all else. Once they felt they had fully grasped what each path had to teach, they would choose another, then another. Unfortunately, some Eldar became so focused upon one set of experiences that sometimes their mind could no longer adapt to a new discipline, having become lost upon that path. In the case of the path of the warrior, these individuals were known as exarchs, soldiers so potent and filled with wrath that even their own people no longer fully trusted them. The Eldar remained free from Slaanesh at death by using a technology known as a Spirit Stone. Worn at all times by an Eldar, at death their soul entered the gem, which was retrieved by their loved ones. Its contents were released into the craft world's infinity circuit, the crystalline power grid that lay at the core of every world ship. Within it, the spirits of the dead could live on, in ways that sometimes made even the Eldar uneasy. every infinity circuit also held a secret, a surviving fragment of the Aeldari war god Cain, which grew into a massive statue called an avatar. These avatars of Cain could be awoken through the sacrifice of a great Eldar warrior to lead the people of the craft world to war. But not all Aeldari had chosen to abandon the perversions that had led to their damnation. These were the Drukhari, sometimes called Dark Eldar, who chose to take refuge in the city realms of the Aeldari that lay in the webway. The largest of these realms is known as the Dark City of Camorra, where the Drukhari still revel in the lifestyle of the cults of excess that led to the fall. The Aeldari had committed their darkest crimes in the shadows of the webway, but the psychic wards of that place protected them from Slaanesh's thirst. The Drukhari were the living embodiments of all that was cruel in the Aeldari character, and they reveled in the physical and emotional pain of other thinking beings. They had discovered that the key to warding off Slaanesh's hunger was simply to restore their lost immortality and never die at all. Though they could no longer practice the ancient Aeldari psychic arts for fear of drawing the notice of she who thirsts, they could passively feed off the psychic emanation of others' agony. This potent energy kept them young and healthy for countless centuries. To serve this need, the Drukhari made constant raids into real space from the webway to harvest slaves from many different species. Their future was grim, marked only by torture and murder. The final group of Aeldari survivors were the strangest. Known as the Harlequins, they were followers of Segarak, the Laughing God, and had fled with him into the wilds of the webway to serve his ends. There, like the Drukhari, they were protected from Slaanesh's birth, and Segarak drew their souls to him at death to keep them from she who thirsts. The Harlequins saw no difference between the practice of art and war, and, as their name implied, their duty was to keep alive the Aeldari myth cycles. They constantly performed plays and dances for their people, no matter where or how they chose to live. This was so that all Aeldari, regardless of faction, could maintain a common culture. Known for their brightly colored clothing, incredible agility, and unusual weaponry, the Harlequins were the only Aeldari welcomed openly by all the other survivors after the fall. But the Harlequins were more than just the keepers of a lost culture. They were the hidden hope of the Aeldari people. The Harlequins' greatest secret was that they were the guardians of the Black Library. This was a special craft world hidden deep within the confines of the webway, said to contain all the hidden knowledge of their lost empire. At its heart lay a book of crystal, sealed by chains of light since the moment of Slaanesh's birth. It contained the words of the Laughing God himself. There was a reason Segarak's laughter echoed within the confines of the webway. Within that book was the Laughing God's ultimate jest. It was a way to trick she who thirsts into using all of her stolen power not to consume the last of the Aeldari, but to restore them. This was the Harlequins' so-called final act, and all the Aeldari factions would play a part in its unfolding. Yet, while Slaanesh was the great enemy of the Aeldari race, it did not exist alone within the warp. There were older and even more foul powers within the Immaterium. Having gained a taste of what reality had to offer through the Eye of Terror, these beings now hungered to claim the rest of the galaxy for their own.